Greetings, everybody. Welcome to the June meeting of the North End Neighbourhood Council. We always get concerned when it's nice weather outside and we don't get anybody, but when you have good speakers, you get people being with you. So thank you all for showing. Those of you who are on Zoom, if you've been on Zoom with us before, we've still got the problems of the connections between the room and the Zoom. So as we've got so many people in the room today, we'll probably be ignoring comments and questions from Zoom. You have my apologies, but if you put them in the chat, I go into the chat afterwards and forward those questions on and get my answers directly. So please go ahead with that. Announcements. First, great news is that the Wheelock Library is opening Thursday, June the 5th. And I think that's earlier than I think they envisaged. That's great news. And I think one of the things that we learned about through that closure is that is the most popular library in the city. And it also lends out nearly half of the lending of books goes out through that library. So give yourself a pat on the back if you're a supporter of the library. We love the library. I've got a couple of items. We are really lucky to have Historic Tacoma as a partner with us in a lot of endeavors. Those of you that follow our Facebook page may have seen something that got posted yesterday. That Historic Tacoma has produced a walking tour of the Proctor District. So you can go on to get that link off that posting, and it'll give you a walking tour of 35 different buildings, a little bit of history about them, and as I understand, that is sort of a living document, so they may actually be adding more locations as that goes on. The next item with Historic Tacoma is they put in an application to designate the North Union Avenue Greenway under the Historic District. I think that's what it's called. So we are obviously supportive of that, and we, as North End Neighbourhood Council, will be supporting them, and we've written a letter to the council asking them to waive the application fee. Moving right along, I'd like to have our police representatives come up.
I'm not sure about myself. It must be Kristen. It
was Kristen. It was.
All right. Hello, I'm Officer Luke Wallen with the Tacoma Police Department. This is Officer Kristen Braziel, the two sector CLOs for this area, which the North End Neighborhood Council falls under. No big updates from us, but it's several months. Chief Patty Jackson has been in charge of the police department, and we continue to see some shifts in the way she runs operations, which I think are all pluses. We shifted away from the crime plan from the previous police chief, and we're doing proactive set missions in the high crime areas. And her goal is to get more police officers out on the streets to get better customer service, quicker response times. One of the things she is working on is streamlining the in-county lateral process. Any police officer in the Pierce County that wants to become a home police officer, that'd be a really quick process. After they pass the proper background checks, they'd be plugged right in. And additionally, working on shortening the in-state lateral process as well. The summer emphasis has started, so street racing emphasis will continue and be more frequent. We run a North End emphasis as well, which includes Ruston Way, Point Defiance, and then several missions down there at Titlow to address the after-hours activities there. So many of the issues down at Titlow tends to be the younger crowd. So we're hoping with consistent presence down there, we kind of curb the after-hours illegal activity down there, which is usually underage drinking and stuff like that. Simple assaults, maybe some property crime down there. So that has got the attention of the two sector, and will continue to work in those areas.
Any questions? Couple of quick questions? First.
Yes, 4th of July, the evening of Ruston Way, Titlow Park, what's going to happen to be proactive to prevent?
That's a great question. Captain Corey Darlington is aware of that. It is tough enough to staff the 4th of July events as it is, so I don't want to make any promises, but that is on Corey Darlington's radar, and they're trying to figure out if they can have, how they can address that in addition to Ruston Way, maybe allocating some of the officers assigned to Ruston Way to be going down there intermittently, or maybe having a couple down there, but they're still discussing that because it depends on staffing and the crowd down on Ruston Way. But that is a concern that's at the captain level is being addressed, and he's pushing it up further because over the years we got more requests for emphasis there, especially on the holiday week.
One more question, okay, please.
Hi there. The Vashon Island Boaters parking lawn, I understand it's owned by Tacoma, and there's a lot of activity there. Are you liaising with the city of Tacoma or Tacoma Park? Just close it off so you guys don't need to get several 911 calls. It's a favorite weekend haunt, and it goes on till past midnight.
You're talking about the Vashon, the
Boat launch.
The boat launch?
Parking lot.
Yep, so that is part of that emphasis, and we do respond to calls for service down there, and that is a metro park, so they do go through and close the gate. Unfortunately, it only closes the top half.
Right.
So currently, it's just, we go down there when we can, or when we get calls for service. I don't know if Parks Tacoma has a plan to install a gate on the bottom half to close that gate off during.
Yeah, it seems like it's.
So we're running, we've got a lot of people here we want to get through. So questions, we want to push 311 for non-emergency issues, which also not only gets the question through, it gets the issues logged. So please use that. And if you've got something urgent, I'm sure you can grab them at the back of the room before but I just want to keep the okay. Thank you so much. A round of applause for our John Gaines, we don't have public utilities tonight. Fire, Josh. Yeah.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. Well, see if PowerPoint pops up here real quick. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Josh Schlesner, your Tacoma Fire liaison, and happy to be here. This is probably the largest crowd I've seen, and I'm surprised. It's a beautiful sunny day out there, a little windy, but still beautiful out. So, a couple things we'll just kind of talk about as we kind of pull up. One, just call volume. We'd like to kind of let you know call volumes that we've had in the north end. Also, there was one major fire, so I'll just kind of point that out as well. And then in addition to that, talk about whole blood. And we'll also talk about fireworks because 4th of July, as somebody already mentioned, is right around the corner. So here's the incidents just for the north end. By the way, we're hoping that this dashboard that you're seeing here will eventually go public. You guys can actually look at this yourself, click around on the map, and do all sorts of things. Just so you know, that's in the works. It's just not up and going yet. So you can see we're up in call volume this year in the north end, about 14%. So 28 calls more than what we had previously. And then I'm assuming I can just hit the down arrow. Yeah, and then one major fire that we had as well. We had this isn't the actual building, by the way, but it was a detached garage fire in the basement, probably electrical in nature, but total damage to the garage. So our crews did a good job though, protecting it from spreading. There was a lot of trees and power lines above and protected that house as well as an apartment complex, which was right next to the garage. So we're super thankful that we got a good stop on that. And then this next week, June 9th to the 13th, is Blood Advocacy Week. For those of you who are not aware, in January 23rd, we actually started a whole blood program. here in Tacoma. And so one of our units, it's an EMS captain, supervisor of all of EMS, he runs around with a cooler and he actually has whole blood and blood components in his cooler for those times where somebody is completely extenuating or bleeding. And so just to give you guys a little bit of an update on that. So far in Tacoma, we've had 24 lives that have been saved utilizing whole blood, so that's pretty awesome. 10 of them have been medical, most of those actually GI bleed related, 14 trauma, and then Pierce County, Central Pierce also carries blood at this time, and so they've made up the additional there, so you can see 33 lives in Pierce County saved. So back to one slide, that Blood Advocacy Week is just just to kind of encourage people to get out there and donate blood. There's actually quite a bit of a shortage in blood, I learned recently. One, probably because EMS started carrying it, which honestly, the sooner you can get it on, the better. So it actually makes sense for it to be in our hands so we can actually save the lives. Most blood donated are people ages 40 and up. So that's, cool, but hey, we can get a lot more in there. In fact, they said like ages 16 to 18 is down something like 60% over the last 3 years. And so the Blood Advocacy Group actually recognizes that, and they're starting to go out to high schools and have blood drives in high schools. In fact, my wife donated 3 weeks ago at a high school, so I thought that was pretty awesome. And I donated on May 19th, so I can't get it yet, but it's coming. Anyways, get out there and please do that or consider that if you would never have. Fireworks in Tacoma, since I won't see you till July 7th. It is illegal in Tacoma. Has been since 1992, nothing new. Okay, there is a fine for it if they catch you. Fine is $513. If you see somebody setting off fireworks as well, there's a couple ways that you can report it. First off, do not call 911. Okay, I will tell you right now, 4th of July is probably the busiest day for the fire department. Can't imagine why. In fact, I'll tell you, me working in the field, it was some of the craziest times, because you'd leave one fire, you'd be going to the next. It was just that quick. And a lot of them were serious house fires too, so there was like no rest for us, and in fact, very little water. So there's a couple ways you can report it though. I have it up here, and I handed out some sheets of paper as well. You can actually do it online, or you can call. If you're going to do it online, you just type in fireworksreport.com, and that'll get you to a form that you can fill out of where you see the offenders, and it kind of goes from there. And it actually opens up early. It's just not the 4th of July that this form is going to be open. It opens up June 28th at 6 a.m. and it's going to run until July 7th at 6 a.m. because we all know people get their fireworks early, and there's always leftovers. So, question?
Fireworks were Saturday, April 19th, with her daughter who lived down here for 31st and Warner for 20-some years. Why are there fireworks tonight over Ruston, more for us than the 4th of July? And it isn't, it still wasn't stopping. It was a 30-minute fireworks display more impressive than the 4th of July, and I can't find anything anywhere about it. April 19th of this year.
Wish I had an answer for you. I don't know.
Some wealthy person who has done this before. I think he lives in Bellevue, and for whatever reason, he's done it a couple times over the next day. It's legal and it's authorized.
Well, all I can tell you guys is report it. I'm not the enforcer, I'm the put outer. So. And then if you do like to enjoy the fireworks, realize that Summer Blast is going to be occurring again this year, obviously, 4th of July, and that is hosted by Parks Tacoma. So thanks, Parks Tacoma, for all your work and planning that you put into that. Fire will have a presence down there as well. We always have like golf carts and stuff like that, so we can run around all the way down Ruston Way, as well as the Dunes area, to make sure that we provide proper EMS coverage for them. And with that, is there any questions?
One question.
Where do you donate blood in Pierce County now if you don't find a van?
Yeah, so there's a couple, so there's always Red Cross, does donation sites all over, and you can just look them up online. The other one is Bloodworks Northwest. If you guys have heard me talk about this before, I usually encourage Bloodworks Northwest, and the reason being is your blood actually stays here. If you donate to American Red Cross, you might have your blood shipped somewhere else. In fact, first time I donated to American Red Cross, I learned that my blood went to Portland.
Where is it located?
Bloodworks Northwest is more mobile, so they kind of travel around. So
what happened to the donation center?
I can find out for you. I really don't know, so I'll make sure I get back to Peter on that.
Okay. Round of applause for the fire department. Josh, who always reaches out to us and has been coming to our meetings religiously, so thank you very much. Alisa, you're up. Well, Josh segued into the Parks Department.
Yes, we did. So, when I have too many. Okay, so I'm Alisa, Ohanlon, Regala. I'm with Parks Tacoma. I do the long-range planning. So this gets to be the busy time of year for the programs side of our house, that side of the house that puts on the summer blast for 4th of July. Thanks for that nod of appreciation, and I noted your question, and I can check with our maintenance teams. I just wanted to note a few things happening. If you've been to Point Defiance, you know that there's some construction going on. We're putting in a new trail, so the traditional entrances are going to be closed for a year. It's going to affect if you're doing the Sound and Arrows, and another couple of weeks, it's going to change that route a little bit. But it's going to separate bike lanes from car lanes, so we're going to have safer access around the park, among other improvements. So be patient with that, or appreciate your patience. I wanted to correct something that I said last time, and that was with regard to the summer meals programs. And we do that. We provide summer meals at the spray grounds. Unfortunately, we had vandalism at South Park. I noted this last time. And someone asked about the summer meals program. Why would closure of the spray park affect the summer meals program? And it's because health department regulations require that we have a working restroom, running water when we provide the meals program. And so unfortunately, vandalism affected the spray ground as well as the restroom. So that meal program will not be available at South Park, but it continues to be available at the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 other parks that we have across the city. So I always encourage looking at our website for all the detailed information. Again, summer is a really busy time for our program side of the house. A lot of youth programs, especially because school is out, so summer late nights. I want to note that we have opened, or are soon opening, one of our big projects for the last some years has been to make improvements with the school district to some of their elementary school playgrounds so that those playgrounds can be available to the public for use as a neighborhood park when school is not in session, and making improvements that also make it more of a nature-like setting, so bringing some more natural elements to the neighborhood. So Whitman, in the South End, Man, and Larchmont are all part of that program. So just to see improvement in those playgrounds there. And I want to note that Wright Park, if you've been there, unfortunately, there was rot unanticipated that happened in the footings of some of that play structure. So that has been shut down for a bit now, and unfortunately it was unanticipated. So we did not have the funding planned for an improvement at this time, but the Tacoma Parks Foundation, if you're familiar with them, they are the nonprofit foundation that helps to raise funds for your park system. They've been able to provide $100,000 from the endowment that was originally set up. Remember several years ago when Zena Linnick Park, the Zena Linnick project was built at McCarver, which is now Edmund Travis Elementary, and there was that park that was installed. There were also improvements made at Wright Park, and the thinkers of that project got ahead and established an endowment. So thanks to that, we are able to make those repairs at Wright Park and hopefully bring that back online later this summer. And I think, North Slope Historic District Playground is being improved. So I would encourage you to go to the website there. And we'd love to hear what you think those improvements should be in that park. And finally, I want to bring attention to the zoo in Northwest Trek. You know, they are our premier wildlife conservation parks, doing a lot of things, but a lot of animal conservation and preservation. But regionally, the purple martin is a conservation priority, and they did have nests, they did have habitat. That was a long Ruston way, but we had to move them, and so let's see, they have been able to expand some 10 new nesting boxes at the boathouse, and it looks good that the martins, the purple martins, will be re-nesting there. So we are very pleased that you know, nobody likes to be, it's uncomfortable for anybody to be unhoused, and so we're happy to be able to relocate the purple martins successfully.
Any questions for Alisa? Yes.
Okay, big building next to Fort Anthony's restaurant. So you're facing the water, Fort Anthony's, and to the left is big building, and it has those plaques that are historical explanation things. One of them is broken off, it's been broken for years, and it looks really ugly, and the place just, it makes the whole place look terrible. And why can't that ever be fixed?
Plaques fixed, ugly. I will pass this on to our maintenance team.
I can show you the picture.
If you have a picture, yeah,
Okay.
you share that with me in the back.
Any other questions for Alisa? Yes, at the back. Right at the back.
Something similar to that is that when I go to the parks and I do see maintenance that needs to be addressed, who do we contact on those issues? Like there were broken sprinklers and swings.
Yeah, you bet. So, yeah, but there should be the number on our website, 305-1000. Have you ever tried that number? And we go to our front desk. I recognize that it likely is only during regular traditional work hours, 8 to 5. So weekends probably you're not going to get somebody in person, but you can call that number 253-305-1000.
And although 311 doesn't cover the parks, they do forward them through to
That is
so
correct. You can call 311, but because we're a separate district, those calls at 311 go to the city, but they do forward them to us, so we can get them.
Joe, one last question.
Alisa, rather than the definition of a school park, unquote, these school playgrounds that are being opened up are really just play spaces. You're not inviting people in to have barbecues and do things like that.
No, we do not invite barbecues on the school grounds.
Anyway, so a round of applause for the parks and a round of applause for Alisa. We really are lucky with our parks. We have beautiful parks. We got Rosalind Medina from the schools, and she's on the line. Going to see if we can patch her in, if we can.
Can you hear me okay?
So while Bevan's doing that, I'm just going to mention, I forgot in announcements, we're always looking for additional board members. When we get a full house like this, it's great because some of you are here today and you're not normally here. We want to know how we get you here more often, and if you're interested in joining the board or observing the board, we actually have a board meeting coming up next Monday. So reach out to me or anybody else. We would love to enlarge the board. That being said, I think we have Rosalind on? Yes.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you, yes.
Great. Thank you. My name's Rosalind Medina, and I am the Chief Financial Officer for Tacoma School District. I wanted to share with you some information about some things going on at the school district. Unfortunately, my news is not positive and exciting, although it's graduation season and we have a lot of great things that are happening in schools. But if you haven't seen it in the news, the district is facing a pretty significant budget shortfall this year, coming up in the budget year coming up of $30 million. And so we keep finding that we're falling short because revenues from the state and revenues to cover our costs are not coming in to cover the growing costs. 86% of our budget is in salaries and benefits, and that just continues to climb. We're also seeing with inflation that our daily expenses are continuing to climb as well. The same things that hit you in your pocketbooks at home, insurance, gas, food, are all the same costs that are hitting us at the school district as well. So right now we have two big things that are also outstanding on our budget development, which are federal level cuts that might be occurring. Not sure what the impacts of that may be yet. And then we're bargaining with our biggest bargaining unit, which are the teachers, and hoping for great results there, but a cost that we have to try to build into our budget for the future. Our goal has always been to keep the cuts away from the classroom, and we've been really working proactively to do that. Unfortunately, because we've cut so many things over the last several years, we've cut administration last year, and 21% of our administration last year. We did $40 million of cuts last year and $10 million the year before. We're to the point where we've got to cut staff and programs. The easy things that don't have impacts on people's lives have been reduced already. And so now we're making an effort to do that. And we did end up non-renewing some teacher contracts for what are called provisional staff, which are some of the newer provisional teachers. And we're working to hire back as many of them as we can, but we laid off 105 of those teachers moving into next year. And another 118 staff members were impacted as well. We have almost 5,000 employees in the Tacoma School District. Just for example, we're one of the largest employers in the Pierce County area, as well as in Tacoma. So our goal is to try to rehire as many of those as we can and find jobs for everyone where we can. Unfortunately, that won't always be the results. So we will be presenting to our board on our budget on June 26th. We're happy to hear any kind of comments. We have a great website that I can drop a link to in the chat so that you can access it with all kinds of facts and questions. And if you want to entertain questions, I'm happy to try to answer any of those that you might have.
We've probably got time for one question, if there's anything on the school district. If not, we're going to let you off, Rosalind. Thank you for joining us.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Christina, you come up. So, I'm sorry, a round of applause for the school district. We started recording with all everyone. Good night, schools.
Hey, I will be very quick tonight. I'm Christina from the city manager's office. I made sure there's plenty of time for the council members to serve here and for your great presentation you're going to get tonight on the legislative session. So just one thing to flag for you, and that is that Councilmember Christina Walker is going to be holding a walking event with the community on Saturday, June 14th. It's going to start at 10 a.m. and go till 11. She's meeting people in front of Lincoln High School, and they'll walk towards the Lincoln Business District. So you can join in at any point, either at the start or along the way, and share your perspective about city policies and what you'd like to see happen, and ask for any questions that you have. So hope you can join for that if you're interested. I'll turn it over to the council.
A round of applause for Christina. It's so lucky Christina is our liaison into the city manager's office. She is super responsive. Every time we send her a question, she jumps on it right away. So thank you, Christina. And John is up. Do we have Councilmember Scott?
Yes, I am. This is my partner in crime here. This is Laurie, his daughter. Sorry. Okay. All right, I'm going to keep this very brief because you have a packed agenda. The only three things I want to talk about. Number one, the City Council is holding our public hearing on the comprehensive plan update tomorrow during our council meeting. So we'll start no earlier than 5:15 p.m. Comprehensive plan is not just the zoning code for the housing part of our city; it's the entire land use map for the entire city. So everything from our shoreline to our transportation master plan to our housing to our industrial tide flat areas, all that is part of the comprehensive plan update. And so we are doing a hearing on that. The Planning Commission has done their work. It's coming to the full council for us to get public information from you all. I think Christina offered that she would collect written comments here and submit them. So if you want to write comments down and hand her, she'll make sure they get into us. Otherwise, you can log into our council meeting and provide your comments. I really want to lean into this a little bit because often when people get really interested in land use, it's when the building shows up or the project breaks ground. And that is too late. If you want to change what gets built, you have to be ahead of it with the land use conversation and comment. So that's just my first big thing for that. Number two was some of you have been very interested in the Christian Adams update adaptive reuse project. So OTAC has kind of completed its work, and we are working to facilitate. Christina's working with community and economic development to facilitate them coming back and talk to you all about what came out of that. So I know it was on the agenda last month here. So we'll get someone from OTAC to come out and speak to you all about that. I'll be here for that conversation too, because it's important that OTAC's going to kind of share what they heard from the public. They're going to share some of the scenarios that they developed, and then for me to be here and some of my colleagues to talk about what future decisions we make around land use for that. Again, the Cushman Adams substation is not surplus until 2027. It's not a vacant building. It's not a derelict building. It is still an active substation that TPU is currently using. But the goal is to have an idea of what we want to do with it when that building is surplus in 2027. And I think the only, my notes here, those are the big two. I think I only had two things to talk about today. I know I'm violating the rule of the magic three, but
questions for John?
And real quickly.
Wow, I don't think we've ever let you get off without a question.
Well, I mean, we have some people.
Oh, one question.
Yes.
Senior Centers, can you update us on the status of your collaboration with Metro Park?
Yeah, I mean, we could talk more further about Metro Parks has wandered off, but we closed our senior centers, the ones that we were operating back in at the end of December, and then except Lighthouse for a little bit longer into the year. All that is transitioned over to Metro Parks, so they're operating the programming services through that. The only one that is not changed is the Point Defiance Ruston Senior Center is still operating because that is operated through a joint use agreement with Frank Toby Jones. So that one is still operating and will continue to operate at least through March of next year. All the rest of the services have transitioned over to our People Center, Eastside Community Center, North Point Center, and Star Center. And so far, I've heard positive responses. I think they've smoothed out a lot of the hiccups and what concerns people had around meals and services. But I am, sorry, Peter. I'm also updating the city's aging-friendly city action plan this summer. We have some conversations around that, which is the work that we really want to think about how we make our city more age-friendly. And I'm going to be bringing some of the people back who are part of that transitional conversation to talk about that.
Yeah. Round of applause for John. Councilmember Scott asked to come and speak to us. So. Go ahead.
Hello, everybody. I'm Councilmember Jamika. I represent District 3. I first thank you for giving me some time to come in and just chit chat with you guys. I wanted to update you or share with you all that an effort that I am working on to that's exploring the renaming of Division Avenue. There has been conversation in the community, and maybe some of you agree with it, maybe some of you just heard of it, that the name division kind of unintentionally reinforces kind of a historical division that people have seen between North End and other communities, particularly the Hilltop. And so to help address that concern, I am exploring the possibility of the name change. And the first step that I had, I guess first step after speaking with community members, was meeting with the Historical Tacoma Society, or the Historical Tacoma, and talking about just like the history of that name, making sure that it wasn't anything that was specifically tied to any, story of history in Tacoma in general, and it is not. It's just kind of a name that ended up being as such. And so the next step that I want to take is meeting with all of the neighborhood councils. So you are all my first neighborhood council that I've met with on this subject. And so I'm just really looking to make sure that I get some input from people and get other folks' thoughts. And obviously on the list of things that are a priority in the city, this is not a highest, but it is something that does take a little bit of work. And so I wanted to get on it and see what people are thinking, so we can kind of look at what would be those next steps. The process for this would include various things, but the biggest step is that we would need to, or I would need to, I'm saying we, because I'm gonna hopefully volunteer you guys to join me in this. But it's to collect signatures from property owners along Division Avenue itself. We would need, let me make sure I have the right numbers, at least 2/3 of the property owners that are abutting the frontage of the affected roadway, which would be Division, as well as 50% of those property owners within 500 feet. So it's a pretty long street. There's a lot of signatures to gather. And then after that, it would come to council for a final approval. I just wanted to take a few minutes to answer any questions that you all might have.
So start with the lady.
What is the proposed name?
So that is also the fun part. So there's a couple of names that have been suggested, or that I've just kind of been coming up with myself to try to help jog some other inspiration in the community. So some of the ones that we have thought of is Wright Parkway, Destiny Drive, and Wellness Road, just as a nod to all of the various medical buildings and agencies along the way. And so those are not by any means final. That is just me trying to make sure that people are kind of getting a sense of what types of names we're looking for. One of the things we did talk about with Historic Tacoma is maybe not necessarily looking to name it after a specific person, just, as history goes on, time goes on, we might find things that we don't like about somebody's legacy, or just in general, it might not feel like, it matches with whatever it might be that we as a community, or the communities in the future, are looking to kind of uplift and celebrate. So looking for something that people can kind of identify with for generations to come.
Question on the back wall, please. Ladies, quickly.
Yes, I was just wondering what the cost is when we change the name on something like that.
I'll need to double check. I think most of the cost would be for the sign changes. So okay. I can follow up and make sure I get the information to you. Probably just need
So just a quick heads up, when you change a street name and people are receiving federal benefits, it drives things crazy.
Thank you for the heads up. I appreciate that. I think that is it. If you have any other questions, or if you have any name suggestions, feel free to email me, jscott@tacoma.gov.
A round of applause for. And we have, Arena, do you want to have one additional liaison report? So, Arena, here's the.
Hi everyone, I'm Irina Rasputinus. I organized Tacoma Porch Fest, which is coming to. Okay, and I just learned from Councilmember Scott that if I use we instead of I, that means you're all volunteered into my whole situation. So I'm gonna, these are fresh off from the printer. I'm gonna pass around these cards that have some information. And if you look at the back, it shows the map of the festival. And some of you maybe live in the new extension of the Porch Fest zone, and a little flyer on your door, just making you aware of the festival and inviting you to sign up as a porch host. Please consider signing up as a porch host. Tell your neighbors. The festival can't happen if you don't have porch hosts to host all the music. But we do have a lot of porch hosts already signed up. We have about 85 porch hosts, and there are definitely more on the south side of 6th Ave because the festival's already been there for 3 years, but we're getting good numbers here too. I wanted, as you're passing around the card, if you just turn it around on the back end, maybe I should ask, is anyone not familiar with Porch Fest? Do I need to describe it? Okay, one person in the back. It's a music festival that happens on people's porches. You put bands on porches, like hundreds of bands on porches. You walk around with your beverage of choice, legal, preferably, and enjoy the music. You'll hear music that you don't like, and you can just walk to the next one. Maybe you'll like that one better.
Free.
It's free, it's accessible, it's walkable, it's wheelable if you're a wheeling person, bikeable. Couple things we ask, it does bring in a lot of traffic, a lot of cars. We encourage people to park outside of the Porch Fest zone. And we encourage that as much as we can, but people will park where they find spots. So there will be a lot more cars parked here. It's just one weekend of the year. It's a really fun time, but if you know you're gonna need to leave your house during Porch Fest, maybe plan ahead for that. There'll be some streets that will close. Mostly, I haven't fully decided exactly which streets. I'm kind of seeing where all the porches are. But I think 10th, North 10th in front of Grant Elementary, I'm gonna close and put some food trucks there. And I'm still figuring out where else. There are a bunch of businesses along 6th Ave. They're gonna be porch hosts. We use a loose definition of porch in that situation. So if you flip your card around, it's new here, so I want to make sure everyone kind of understands the flow. It's going to be on the south side of 6th Ave on July 12th, and on the north side of 6th Ave, July 13th. And then the festival is then split into 2 halves to make it walkable. So the first half of the day, it'll be on the east side of the neighborhood, up to 5th Street, and on the second half of the day, it'll be on the west side. And that is only to make the festival zone walkable. Grant Elementary is gonna be open. There's gonna be a family-friendly activity zone inside Grant, the outdoor grounds, not the building. The building will be closed. But the YMCA and Tacoma Public Libraries will be there with activities for kids. And we'll see if we get any very family-friendly bands that we can put in there as well. Okay.
Big round of applause for Arena. We'll be continuing to give updates on that as we get closer. Thank you very much, Arena, for involving us. I mentioned a couple of months back that the North End got rated as the best neighborhood in Tacoma. And one of the things they didn't rate was our representatives in Olympia, which they should have done, because we are really blessed to be part of the 27th district with Speaker Jinkins and Senator Trudeau and Chair of the Transportation Department, Jake Hines. So every year they come and give us an update, and I'd like to ask Speaker Jinkins and Senator Trudeau to come up. We have a PowerPoint.
Thank you for helping get the PowerPoint going. Senator Trudeau might be really excellent with this. I'll start off while we're getting this up. I'm Laurie Jinkins. I've represented the district for the last 15 years. Thank you. And as was said, we try and come every year, some mix of us to present to you. This is a very high-level PowerPoint. We did a lot this session, as we do every session. I can guarantee you that some of you will have questions about things. You're saying, like, why wasn't this in your PowerPoint? Please feel free to ask us. We're always open to having separate meetings with folks and things like that. So we want to hear from you about what you're interested in too. But before we get going on this, maybe I trust Senator Trudeau and introduce herself.
Hey everyone, good evening. Yasmin Trudeau. I've had the pleasure and privilege of representing the 27th since I was appointed in 2021. And this is my first session of my first 4-year elected term. So pretty amazing. I'm going to be really excited to talk about the capital budget, which is an area I work on. And then obviously one of our seatmates is not here. So to the extent that there are transportation related questions, we will try our very best.
but we're really lucky in the 27th that we do have Chair Pai, and so we will follow up with anything or have his office reach out to anyone as appropriate to answer some of those questions, because it's pretty awesome when we get the trifecta up here to cover such major topics, but we're not always, at least I don't always follow transportation as closely because we have Representative Laurie who does such a great job for our district.
So let's get going here, just with a high-level overview. So this last session was what's known as our long session. We wrote the biennial budget. It was 105 days long. We passed, one of the things I like to track is the number of bills we passed and how many we passed with bipartisan support. So you'll see here that 65% of the bills, 274 of them, passed with at least 80% of the legislature voting for them. And then 164 were bills that had like nearly everyone voted for them. So I would say this is not as bipartisan as we have been historically. So we're like the 40% were unanimous. We used to be up towards 60% unanimous, and we used to be in the mid 80% as opposed to the mid 60% in terms of bipartisanship. So that's what's happening nationally is also having an effect here in Washington State. The other thing I'll just say is we had to do 3 budgets this year. The operating budget, the capital budget, which Senator Trudeau was the prime negotiator from the Senate, and the transportation budget, which was Representative Pai was the prime negotiator from the House. So you have leaders who are really very, very integrally involved in all of the budgets. We started the year with a major budget shortfalls, and I'll talk more about this on the operating and transportation budgets, and a very deeply chaotic kind of federal situation where things were changing by the day. So it was hard to figure out how to move through this session, but we did. And I'm gonna, if it's okay, I'm gonna send this next slide to Senator Trudeau, because I think it's, oh, maybe I'm not. Housing, yes.
But I'll just talk really high level, and if folks have questions, please let me know. One of the things in the legislature that we really tried to focus on is figuring out how to address the issue of housing. We know that housing in every part of the state, one of the lead negotiator for the Republican caucus who works with me on the capital budget stood up on the floor, and it was a great uniting force to say, yes, in Ritzville, in Spokane, in Tacoma, in Seattle, in like all of these areas need housing, and they have different housing needs. So we started the year of housing during the last biennium. We sort of had the biennium of housing policy, and these are some of the ones that we actually followed up with. So you'll see here, providing a statewide rent stabilization mechanism, expanding housing options around transit hubs. This is one, 1461 and 1217 were both bills that I worked on really aggressively in the Senate. For 1461, to note, it is a mandated affordability along with transit-oriented development. So when you think about areas in Tacoma that will be developing and are developing due to new transportation investments, it allows there to be some required affordability so that the people that live in those areas have some chance at being able to address a lot of the new housing stock that's going to be coming in around transit. So I would address those. The rest are really trying to figure out how we help with our supply situation, expanding our covenant homeownership to get more folks into the opportunity of homeownership, especially those that have been like specifically, purposely and intentionally restricted from homeownership, which that program addresses. I could answer any questions if you have them.
We will go through the whole thing and then come back for questions. I notice people are taking photographs of this, which you're very welcome to do, but the neighborhood council has a copy of this, and we're happy to have the neighborhood council send it out to anybody who wants it or their whole list when this is done. So it's yours to send out. Next topic was education. Probably the biggest thing that we did in education this year was special ed funding. We continue to have challenges with funding basic education in Washington State. And a lot of that is very much related to the challenges that individual families have, the school district has, and state government has, with increasing costs, inflation, and things like that drive up costs all along the way. So it's hard for our school districts to stay kind of ahead of the curve. But special ed funding is part of basic education, and so we made a significant increase in funding there. We also added money for school districts for materials, supplies, and operating costs. Those two portions are really the big part of the definition of what is basic education in Washington State. So that's where we made some major funding advancements. We also moved forward on a bill to clarify both parents and students and educators' rights as it relates to school districts, and actually expanded on an initiative that we had last year that we adopted that had a number of parents' rights in it, but it didn't include a number of things that we added in this year as added parents' rights. And then we also looked through part of what that initiative did was it gathered up things that were sprinkled throughout the law all over in the statutes and put them in one place. So we did that with student rights too. There were a number of students' rights, the rights that students have, that were sprinkled throughout the law that were hard to find. So now students and parents can find those things throughout or in one spot. And then we also made it clear that folks who are employed by school districts cannot be retaliated against for helping someone exercise their legal rights, their students or parents. So that was another thing that we did. And then there were a number of things that we did just in the operating budget in terms of maintaining funding for our school meals and summer meal program and some things like that. As I said, this was a really fiscally restricted year for us. One of the challenges that we have in education is because there's 1 million students in Washington State schools. Every small thing you do, when you multiply that by 1 million students, makes it's a big ticket item. So we have to be really kind of thoughtful about how we move and engage there. Yeah, I would say I think the biggest thing that we did on community safety was House Bill 2015 was provided some funding at the local level, $100 million in one-time law enforcement grants, and then provided counties with the ability to a 0.1% sales tax if they wish to continue funding. So this kind of gets them going and gives them the counties the opportunity to continue their funding. The other thing we did was we defined community safety as including law enforcement, but we all know that community safety is more than just police officers, right? Or law enforcement officers. It has to do with funding for supports for behavioral health intervention and things like that. So for prosecutors, for other kinds of support. So we define community safety broadly to encompass those things so that every community can decide for itself how it wants to spend that money. We also passed a bill relating to the requiring a permit to purchase a firearm, which is a proven way to bring down or to increase firearm safety in Washington State and around the country. And just did some clarifying things. Interestingly, we've heard from prosecutors that they were having a hard time prosecuting hate crimes cases unless the only motivation for the crime was because of hatred of a protected class. We amended the law just to say that can be one of the motivations, and if it is, then it would be charged with a hate crime. And then we have the only private detention facility in the state of Washington, really, here in the 27th legislative district. And we passed a bill to require, basically to make sure that they follow Washington State food safety laws, some of our other just fundamental laws that anybody who has a facility open has to follow, and that we can enforce those. So that was a lot of what we did with community safety. You want to add anything on that? The healthcare, one of the things I'm most happy about is we passed a bill that said you can't tell public health officials that they can't talk about evidence-based public health interventions to increase people's public health. I just want to tell you a quick story. This bill idea came to me because our new director of health, Chantel Reed for the Tacoma Pierce County Health Department, worked in Louisiana for many, many years, and she called me last December. She was home visiting her family, and she said a gag order had just come out saying that all the local health districts in the state of Louisiana were told that they could not talk about vaccines at all. Not the benefits, not the downsides, not the anythings or anythings. She's like, we can't let that happen here. And so we got this idea to run this bill. And did that. We also did a lot. We continue to do a lot on mental health and substance use disorder. We try to do as much as we can to protect a woman's right to choose. And the other thing that we were seeing is, probably seeing some access to hormone replacement therapy restricted for people. And so making sure that we make clear that we were not going to restrict access there. In fact, we were going to expand. So that was another thing that we did. I know it's going to be next.
Right. Well, we did end up doing, quite a bit when it came to recycling reforms. I think Sherry and I talked a little bit earlier today about the RAP Act and some other efforts that have been happening. So 5284 was a piece of legislation to make sure that we actually have a better functioning recycling system. Many of you may know that our system is just really not functioning well, and it's been on life support for a number of different reasons for quite some time. So I would encourage you, if you're interested in recycling and looking at how to more efficiently recycle and reduce waste and litter, 5284, I believe that was Senator Liz Loveland. We also did some stuff around improving our Clean Fuels program, making sure that our Climate Commitment Act pieces were, that we shored those up and that we expanded some places. As mentioned here, supported by the voters in 2024, we heard loud and clear that the Climate Commitment Act was really important, so we wanted to make sure that we had everything worked out to be able to move forward on some of the programs that were still pending based on it being on the ballot. Maintaining our commitment to fish barrier removal in our transportation budget. Fish barrier was a really big topic. I had a bill related to fish barrier removal that would have looked at actually fulfilling the entire culverts case. For folks that haven't followed, there was a culverts case that went to the Supreme Court where tribes in this state actually challenged the state of Washington based on fish passage. So it is something that we are under a federal injunction for. So that's why it is very significant, because we do have to pay that obligation. So the transportation budget ended up doing some pretty significant investments to make sure that that obligation is continuing to occur. And the AG's office is going into mediation this summer with the tribes to figure out a more effective way than we frankly currently have right now with WashDOT. So any of you transportation wonks that might be interested in culverts, that's going to be an interesting process to watch over the next couple of months and year. And investing in salmon hatcheries and steelhead recovery. The capital budget is, I mentioned earlier, really just being proud of the work the capital budget did. It is the one budget that did not have the same deficits because it works a little bit differently. It is based off a bond model, so it bonds against the revenue that comes into our operating budget. So it was arguably the most healthy, but it was very unpredictable. One of the things that we were really proud of doing is to focus on, again, thinking about fish passage. It's not just about culverts, but thinking about hatcheries, working with our tribal partners who had incredible, really incredible results bringing salmon back, and making sure that we are focused on places that we can invest into the capital budget and infrastructure, maybe where we did not have the same opportunity for operational.
I think we have just a few more slides basically on the budgets. So the operating budget we came into session, we went through session with $16 billion deficit. So we were trying to address a $16 billion deficit in the budget. What we tried to do was take a balanced approach. We knew that we could not just adopt revenue, adopt taxation, and cover that $16 billion. We also knew that an all-cuts budget, we had Governor Inslee, before he left office, he was required by law to produce a budget that was all cuts, just so people would be able to see what it was. You know, that did things like ended kidney dialysis for people on Medicaid. Right, those were very huge deep cuts, so we knew it had to be somewhere that our response had to be somewhere in the middle. We ended up with a budget that was about a little bit less than $9 billion of revenue and a little bit more than $7 billion of reductions. So that was how we went forward in the session. We focused really on food, shelter, and health, thinking mostly about what are the things that Washingtonians need to survive, so that you don't make cuts to those kinds of things, or you try to minimally reduce those kinds of things. So you can see here kind of some of the thinking that we engaged in, maintaining food and cash assistance programs. K-12 education is the only place where we actually made really significant adds. Senator Trudeau will talk about the capital budget. We made big adds in housing, that was in the capital budget. And then we delayed, we had a number of programs, for example, I mean, just kind of heartbreaking for us, Fair Start for Kids, that would have rolled out more child care openings across the state of Washington. We had it, and we were slated to start that this year. We had to delay that. We didn't want to add additional ongoing costs. So that's kind of how we thought about it. And if you just think about the operating budget in a big way, this just gives you a sense of what our budget looks like in terms of percentages now from this. We primarily fund public schools, our paramount duty, but human services has a huge percentage in there, and then you look at higher education and other kind of special appropriations that you see at the bottom all the different things that covers. And I think if you look at other, that includes debt service and some other things like that. I'm going to really quickly do transpo, unless we want to do it. For Jake, we should just say random things and fascinate a little bit. But I just would say the transportation budget was also, we look at the transportation budget over a 6-year period because it takes a long time to build a highway. And so you don't want to get into something and say we got the money for the first 2 years, but we don't have the money in the following 4. And so over a 6-year period, that budget was $8 billion short. And one of the biggest challenges in the transportation budget is when we think about inflation for the purchase of food and some other things that we buy, the transportation inflation was running at 30 to 40% for construction. So when we, for example, said we're going to build some new highway and we budgeted for it, the cost for that highway from last biennium went up 30 to 40%. Some situations up as high as 70%, some situations less than that. But that was what Jake was having to kind of deal with and think about. And so his approach, which I think, to in the end, was that we need to stick to the projects that we've already committed to, making sure that we get those done, and that we do them in some sort of priority order, and that we not start bonding for new things at this point when we get things done, because we have too much of a backlog of transportation projects. This just gives you I'm not going to read all through these. These are the things in the 27th legislative district that were funded. Does help, and you're going to see this when Senator Trudeau talks about capital budget. It does help to have a budget negotiator living in your district.
Thank you.
I'll just say that.
Oh, just a couple of bills that sort of expanded. We tried to address a lot of the road safety issues that we were hearing about on the highways. So that includes, making sure there's more driver education opportunities and requiring speed limiting devices for certain drivers that may have a history of driving really fast. Capital budget. So I mentioned already that, we didn't quite have the same restraints as the other budgets, but one of the things that was interesting is we didn't actually know what our final bond capacity number was until the final days of legislative session, which can make negotiations a little bit complicated, because depending on what the final revenue amount and sort of the health of the operating budget was when we actually knew what the full size of the box was. But the deficit did create, just for context, it created a situation where the bond capacity that we had was actually a pre-COVID amount. So we had significantly less already restricted when we started. So it had its own constraints, but certainly nothing compared to the situation that transportation and capital was in. So we really tried to think about team approaches and making sure that all of our budgets were trying to fit in and fill in where we may have had some gaps. One of the things that I'm particularly proud of, and my CEOs are really proud of, we had a record-setting $605 million in the Housing Trust Fund. The Housing Trust Fund is the truly permanently affordable housing. That is where the private market is not developing. So usually that goes to the Department of Commerce. There's a role for the Housing Finance Commission. But this is really the type of housing that the private market is not developing with true affordability, and that's anywhere from 80% AMI, which is sort of considered workforce housing, and below. So it's the range of housing services. Prior to this biennium, I believe it was about a $400 million investment. The total investment for affordable housing infrastructure was $777 million. That was a fully bipartisan, unanimously supported number in the budget. As I emphasized earlier, I think there really is, there's been a coalescing around housing, and certainly in the capital budget when it comes to building it, we had a lot of agreement and enthusiasm. We had nearly $1 billion for K-12 school construction and early learning including childcare facilities. You may have heard about one really exciting one that will be, I think, on a list later, that's in collaboration with the Pierce County Central Labor Council to actually get folks into the workforce, get their kids taken care of on off hours, and be able to really do an apprenticeship program in a very exciting and new way. So we're going to watch that develop here and hopefully see it replicated across the state. So one really cool thing. Oh, and I will say, so one of the things that we did was leave a very healthy engine reserve balance for both the transportation and capital budgets. One thing we know for sure is tariffs are going to crush us. This is a state that's going to be heavily impacted by tariffs. We already know that steel and other construction costs are through the roof through what we're seeing in transportation. Capital budget really is no different. We're seeing projects come back, double, triple what we thought the cost was going to be when we allocated the project. So historically, in the first year of a biennium, we will put in $150 million ending fund balance. This year we had over $350 million in ending fund balance, so that we could, make sure that we were allocating things responsibly, and instead of taking back dollars that we're trying to reconfigure next year, that we had a larger pot to be able to adjust, because it just is a reality. And it was a reality that I think both caucuses, whether they said it publicly or not, we're very much grappling with and figuring out over there.
One other thing I'll add is capital budget is where we also invest in building behavioral health facilities and substance use treatment facilities. We had to peel back a little bit of our investment this year on those, in part because when I first came to the legislature, we would just build things and never really connect it to what the operating cost for the thing was. And so we would get that's built, but we wouldn't have a plan to staff them, or we wouldn't have the budget to staff them. And so really about a decade ago, we put those together and made sure that they were highly ranked. One of the things that happened during the course of this legislative session, for example, is we had been investing a lot. Our tribal partners were building great behavioral health facilities, and they get an enhanced Medicaid reimbursement rate in order to operate their facilities for a lot of different reasons. The federal government cut that session, and then started to kind of make some other commentary about Medicaid cuts in the behavioral health area. So we thought we should yet build what we were starting to build, but maybe not do new things until we know what the Medicaid situation is going to look like. So, and these are some of the great things that Senator Trudeau did.
Pretty cool when you see it all on a page. The 4 months of.
This isn't all of them, it was just all that could fit on one page.
It is truly the best thing to be able to do this. So I guess this is where I just say thank you to all of you for giving me such a cool opportunity. And I would welcome if any of these interest you to know more about them or know when they're going to be opening or what the process is, please let me know. But it ran the gamut in terms of the types of things that we were able to do here that the community is going to be able to touch. So I don't know if you can tell, but I'm proud of it. Well, that's the last slide. I know we were going to end on me, but I've got the mic if folks have questions. I don't know what the timing is.
Please, questions, no speeches, just questions. Keep them short as you can, please. So we'll start with this lady here.
All right, this question's for Laurie Jinkins, and it's already addressed today with Senator Trudeau. What are we doing to protect our investments in I-5 retaining walls that are loaded with graffiti?
I mean, I think that would fall in the transportation budget, so I'd have to check with Jake on what that, we actually though have passed, I don't think this is the only thing that we're doing, but we, over the last 2 years, have passed more littering enforcement and more graffiti enforcement measures. So for folks who are engaging in both littering and graffiti on the retaining walls, there's a larger ability to.
I would like to see in 2026 more emphasis on that to protect our investments.
Lady against the wall.
Mine's kind of a multi-fold. I see the Sheffield Trail, exactly where it is, down the way from me. I see you talking about the floodplain, and then you are also talking about high density in where they're having fence. My concern is you're building high density or requiring high density in the tsunami area, in the volcanic eruption area. Now, we have to get out of there. That Sheffield Trail does not have any way to access us out of there. It's not a health, it hinders us. We need the Fishing War Memorial Bridge open. And I'm looking at the fact that in 2009, January, we had a mandatory evacuation out of sight. So did all of the port. It was mandatory. You didn't have a choice to stay, go in the part of the valley. So the Puyallup River was going to flood. You've got a wastewater treatment plant that was in danger and could have been flooded, and it would have taken out every toilet in Tacoma. My question is, why were that not priorities? When I'm looking as a person who's looking at that, and tsunami area of water coming in on me, or Lahar, or the two dam break areas, the people that I have down there, plus all the workers that when they close down the thing, why are you working on Sheffield Trail with a little minor detail when we've got a lot of other situations? I'm concerned about that floodplain and the fact that we have a decertified levee, and that's concerning.
Sure. So the Floodplains by Design program is a statewide floodplains program. So a lot of the things that come into the capital budget are requested. So a lot of local, like land use, where people are building things, those are not in front of the state legislature. So the state, so what we do, just to give you an idea of how things come to us for Sheffield Trail, for example, the city of Fife lets us know what their legislative priorities are for operating transportation and capital budget. They locally make the decisions about where they're going to invest that infrastructure, and we fund the infrastructure they invest. It would be wholly inappropriate for me to go in and tell the city of Fife how to rework all of their planning. They do that with local residents. So I would say that's probably a question for the city of Fife. I know for the Sheffield Trail, it's the only connector for an outside walk for many folks that are living in apartment buildings in Fife. So I've heard from a lot of folks, especially that might have mobility issues, that there's connections that they can't cross over parts of Sheffield Trail, that it's not workable and walkable. So for me, I tried to respond to the city of Fife and a trail that they, Yeah, no, and I wish I had a better answer for you, but it would be inappropriate for me to speak for the city of Fife and kind of why they make those decisions.
Okay, next gentleman back here.
My question is, as a TPS parent and as married to somebody who works in TPS, I agree with what you said, about how this is our paramount duty. I'm concerned that in the last 6 years, we've gone from 53% of the operating budget, or 52% to 43% towards K-12. And that's just very concerning. We're going to lay off 110 employees nearly, or 105, over 100 further displaced. So my question really boils down to why, over the last 6 years, each biennial, have we been putting less and less towards K-12, and we really considered all revenue options. It seems like a massive drop in just 6 years.
Yeah, actually, every single year, our dollar investment in K-12 has gone up. The overall budget has gone up. So the percentage goes down. So you have to look at both percentages and dollar investments. I think one of the things that's a challenge, like the investments that we made this year in schools, it will end up with about $11 million coming to the Tacoma School District. I've talked to them briefly. That's not going to be everything they need. So my goal over the interim is to be meeting with the Tacoma School District regularly to make sure that I can understand where their funding shortfalls are, what the state legislature can do about it. And because it was, for example, only late in the session when I realized we were already under the special ed cap. So we weren't over the cap, so the special ed dollars didn't benefit the Tacoma School District as much as I thought that it might. Did benefit other school districts. One of the challenges with 293 school districts in the state of Washington is it's always, we're trying to figure out a way to balance those things. This is obviously something that we're going to have to continue working on.
Kristen.
I have a question on the first slide on under housing. The reason I'm asking this is because as a lot of us know in the Proctor District, we've got a new high rises and very little parking. The question was, remove minimum parking requirements. Can you explain what that means?
So right now, and this is not.
They want us to stand back here.
Oh, that's been distracting me to see half of my face. I was like, there must be some reason. I got to look, it was making it hard. So the way that minimum parking requirements, what we have done is said for developers to take a look and work in that area to see what parking requirements are responsive to the community. I'll give you an example. There were parking requirements that applied to the whole state, but they didn't apply equally to the whole state. So there were parts of the state that you would require to have 2 parking spaces that didn't make any sense, and it was precluding development. It was in places that were directly accessible to transit. It was in places even like in downtown corridors, right? So we wanted to say developers are going to develop based on responsive, like what is going to be accessible to the community. So that's what that minimum parking piece did. What they will do is work with local jurisdictions to determine what parking requirements are necessary. The parking situation is a hairy one. This was not my bill. This is one of the most controversial issues that we had in the legislature. So forgive me for not knowing all the ins and outs, but I'd be happy to talk with you offline and get you the specifics. But the problem statement that we had identified was developers were saying this is actually precluding us from developing housing in areas because it doesn't actually make sense to have the same minimum parking requirements in Swim, for example, as it does in Tacoma. So this allowed that. So it doesn't say, no, you can't have parking or anything like that. It just allows that to be addressed because they said they weren't building. And we wanted to make sure that they could, in fact, build.
Question at the back, Joe.
Go back to the early part of your presentation. There was a piece of legislation about who's your parent rights. Specifically, I want to talk about homeschooling. I'm seeing various articles in place around the country where a child is taken out of public school, put into homeschooling, and the child essentially vanishes. No one making sure they're being taught, that they're living under healthy conditions. Some of them are being abused. We have state standards that require visitation, and that the student has to take tests to make sure they're actually learning anything.
We do, I won't be able to speak to the detail, but actually Washington State has an incredibly robust homeschool organization and homeschool standards that are to be followed and requirements for education. I do not believe someone goes into the home, someone who's homeschooling and checks on those. I believe that there's probably reports that come in on that, but I could be wrong about that too. So happy to talk to you to look at that a little more, but that was one of the things when I joined the legislature that I was surprised to find out how many different models and types of homeschooling there were in the state and how robust organizations supporting homeschooling were.
Yeah, this lady in the front.
Medicaid. Do we have any mad money stashed away if this big beautiful bill goes through?
Yeah. The question for folks who didn't hear, that worry about Medicaid and do we have money stashed away? We did not tap the rainy day fund at all in this budget, and the revenue that we adopted while in this first biennium is going to be tight. The revenue grows, and so in the next biennium, we'll start to grow our reserves bigger. We did retain reserves also for that very thing. I would just say, though, if the bill that they're considering in the other Washington is passed, this will be devastating to people in many, many ways in this state and across the country. There is no state that is prepared to pick up for example, there's no state that is prepared to pick up all Medicaid costs that would be cut in that bill. And so that is likely something that would warrant a special session. And for us to figure out what to do, we do have a very excellent Attorney General who is watching for what the federal government does and what things they're doing that are not legal, of which there's a very long list. And he's very smart about how he engages in those cases. So we are paying very close attention, but it's a remaking of this nation like we. I don't know how old any of us are, but none of us have seen it before.
Lady in the second row there.
Me?
Yes.
So one of the many, I'm sure there are many pieces of legislation that you didn't get a chance to mention, and one of them that I feel really proud of is the recognition of Islamic holidays at the state level. We're the first state in the country to do that. It's awesome. As a member of a different minority group, I'm a Jewish American. I just feel really, really grateful for that. I know it's going to affect kids in school that see that their culture is being recognized. And I do have a question that's somewhat related to that, which is that I'm glad that the state legislature has not taken up a very disturbing, wrong-headed definition of anti-Semitism, the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is real. Yes, I know. As a Jew, I know it's real. But there is this definition which has apparently been kind of adopted by our state superintendent of schools. And that's really dangerous because it conflates criticism of a state, the state of Israel, with anti-Semitism, which is absurd because you can certainly criticize a state for its war crimes, for example, and not be targeting a group of people which are not all in that state. And so that definition of anti-Semitism is really dangerous, and I'm very concerned about it. There's a number of groups that are concerned about it. Is there anything the legislature can do to kind of, issue some sort of statement about it? I don't know what the relationship is between the legislature and the superintendent office, how that works.
Sure. So first of all, thank you. That was actually my piece of legislation that passed. And I think part of it, when I introduced it and when I spoke about it, which by the way, it passed unanimously off the Senate floor. Oh, excuse me. Jim McCune did not vote for it. If you guys know Jim McCune, you can call him and ask him. We can't figure it out. Even his caucus can't figure it out. But I brought that bill because when I joined the legislature, I had no idea that I was the first person of Muslim descent to ever serve in the legislature. That had never occurred to me. It's not something I lead with. just as we all have different faiths and beliefs and we all live in community, it's not something we necessarily lead with. But there was a process in my engagement on another piece of legislation a couple of sessions ago, I think it was my first or second session, where a Republican colleague did not understand what the term Islamophobia actually meant. And it created a tension. I actually got gavelled down for saying the word Islamophobia, which I thought, awesome teaching moment, right? Like what a great way to figure out what the problem is. And we did. And it turns out that one of the Republican senators also had a daughter-in-law who was Muslim and who lived in Moses Lake and did not know that there were any other folks representing. And it's Senator Judy Warnick. She represents Moses Lake and Parks and Wenatchee, but she came and she was like, hey, my daughter-in-law is really excited that you and I are talking. So that just spurred in me that we live in this amazing place that if we could only meet each other with a little bit more curiosity and celebration, that maybe something beautiful could happen. And I know for me and my family, we've always invited people in. We've always, been like, come eat food, because what better way to get to know people than by celebration and not just in crisis. And I'll tell you, for a lot of folks in the Muslim community, it has felt like it's been climbing out of a hole that someone else has dug for you. All of the misinformation and the stereotypes, much of which I didn't even realize until September 11th happened to me while I was in high school. And I found out a whole bunch of things I didn't know people thought about. The faith that many people I loved and adored practiced. So I brought that because I thought in Miss Washington we could. And a big thank you to the speaker and to a whole bunch of folks in leadership that said, this is the message that we want to send in Miss Washington, that we can actually celebrate each other, and it's not in crisis, it's not in response to anything else that's happening, but it's just because we can truly figure out and to learn about each other and learn about each other's celebration. So I'm so, honestly, I'm so proud of my colleagues. I'm so grateful to be in this district and have so many people reach out. I did not expect that someone was going to give me a shout out on that. That being said, there are really difficult conversations that are happening, and there are geopolitical things that are impacting our lives and are becoming really difficult for us to meet each other with that same level of love and curiosity. So there are conversations happening about definitions. I know that Kara Washington and others have been in conversation with the superintendent to make sure, number one, that all students' safety is prioritized, all identities are protected. It does not matter if you belong to a group here in Washington State. We have said that we welcome you, we love you, and as long as you're not hurting anybody else, my goodness, like, practice what is best for you. So there have been conversations and they are happening. My last update for you is that they are going to be reworking some of that guidance, and a lot of thanks to pressure that came, from within the Jewish community and organizing as well, but to figure out how we have that balance. Because I always say, as a Muslim person, I will critique Iran, I will critique Saudi Arabia, I will critique any of the Muslim nations that do wrong when they do wrong. And so I think we just have to make sure that we know where that balance is. And I think we're awkwardly walking through it. But if we can do it in this district, and we can figure out how to love each other, the rest of it.
This lady down here.
I have a question about taxes. What are the new taxes that are coming that were used to balance this budget?
I clearly talked too much. We can talk about taxes.
I want to make sure I don't lose any of these. One is a business and occupations tax surcharge, along with an advanced computing surcharge. That all comes together. So the primary dollar amount of that tax comes from companies that earn over $250 million. So if they have taxable income over $250 million, they have a 0.5% surcharge. And that's a temporary surcharge. It's effective from January 1st of 2026 through the end of December in 2029, and that's sunset. There's also an increased charge to mostly, I would say, Microsoft and Amazon, who pay an advanced computing surcharge. And this was something that I worked with them on to increase the amount they would provide for basic government services. And I do want to give a little bit of credit to the CEO of Microsoft for, saying we should be paying more of our fair share. So,
Not be there yet.
that are getting closer. Second thing is ZEV credit, which is a little odd thing, but we have at least one rather large company that is supporting and their climate commitment, or their climate credits, their carbon credits, right? So if there's one company that has hoarded its carbon credits, and then when you hoard them, as they get more expensive to sell, then you can get more money when you sell them. Well, this one company is going to be taxed on hoarding them. The name of the company starts with a T. Then I think one of the challenging ones that we did is applying sales tax to certain services. And one of the things that's been really challenging in Washington State is that we don't really have sales tax on services, yet we are in a complete service economy. Now, so there are many ways that our tax structure is really a very bad tax structure. And we don't really like sales tax, right? Because it's regressive in nature, but it's also super regressive to like end healthcare for people and to cut food programs and things like that, and to not tax on services. So we mostly, we looked at a number of kind of either consulting services, software services, some temporary staffing services, and then took out healthcare temporary staffing. So there's a whole kind of list of those. And then I think the last one, there's two. We increased the capital gains tax. It was at 7% for folks who earn $250,000 or more in cap gains. This says if you earn more than $1 million in capital gains, then it'll be a 9.9% tax. And we revised the estate tax and increased that some amounts. The weird thing about capital gains is to have spent, for me, 9 years fighting to have that. No one testified against doing that. No one. Not people who were going to pay it. No one. So I was like, wow, I guess that was a good fight. And then the final one was we ended a number of tax preferences. And most of these, we have a joint legislative audit review committee that looks at our tax preferences and whether or not they're effective. Are they really doing the things that they said they were going to do? And they then recommend to us times when they're not having any effect. So I won't give them all to you, but the biggest one was like, we don't charge, or we provide a B&O and sales tax exemption for gold bullion. So we don't, for sale of that, we don't do that anymore. We just do that and that getting rid of tax preferences. So there's a whole list of those, but it's a tax preference bill. So those are the 6 things that we did. And then there's also a bill that we passed to fund transportation, which some of you may have heard about, has a gas tax in it. And it also increases the number of fees that haven't been increased for a long time to fund our transportation program. So it was a lot of tax and revenue built together.
Question in the back of the room? Nobody? Oh, this lady here. What fees were increased? You mentioned.
I can't remember there were a number of them. There were 8 or 9. I'm happy to send them out to you if you want to talk after. Give me your email address. I'm happy to send them out to you. If Jake were here, he could tell you what all of them were off the top of his head.
This lady down here.
Yeah, 2 things real fast. First, the exemption for selling a house, capital gains tax exemption, because that $250,000, that should be adjusted for inflation. That thing goes way back, that number. Property values have increased. And
we don't, sale of homes is exempt from our capital gains bill. So it's not under the federal law, but in Washington State, the sale of your home is not considered a capital gains sale.
Oh, okay. Second, real fast. Way for you to raise a lot of money, okay? Just get rid of all the deficit by putting sales tax on all the unhealthy foods, sugar, dyes, you know, all the sausages. I think that's unhealthy. There is no reason for people to eat that garbage. It just makes them unhealthy. So just please put the tax on it.
I appreciate the creative, passionate ideas. There have been taxes imposed on products, sodas and otherwise. They do have, there are folks that that is the food that they have accessible to them, or they are lower income. There are food deserts even in the state of Washington. So there are, here in Tacoma, we're very blessed. We have access to a lot of different types of food. We have fresh food, but there are actually areas in the state where doing that would have a pretty devastating economic impact on folks. I'm with you on getting folks to eat healthy. I grew up low income. I know how sometimes the cycle of what we know is what we know. But there are deep equity implications, but I think you present a creative idea.
I just want to add. At all, and if they only drank water, they would be healthier.
We've definitely tried to do that. They've always been remedial. So that's one of the problems is right when you're passing taxes and revenue. Yeah, my goal as we went through this year was one, I thought we needed to try to do things that were as progressive as possible. Not everything that we did was progressive. But we did a number of progressive taxes. Two, I wanted it to hold up in court. And three, I wanted it to hold up before the people. And so you can't, even though like I'm a public health person, I'm like, yes, tax everything but butter. I was raised in Wisconsin, not tax butter. Makes everything better. But anyway, I'm a public health person on soda pop, on candy, on all of that. But it's the voters are just not, they're just not supporting that.
Can we give a huge round of applause? So much for what you do for us. Thank you for, unlike those politicians from the other Washington, they're always willing to come and speak to us.
Yeah.
And some of us got to hear the speaker before the session started, and she was, hopefully the university will be redoing that. That was an excellent night for those of us.
Now I have to do whatever they want me to because they gave me an honorary doctorate.
Thank you. Okay, we can get through the rest pretty quickly. On the old business, John Hines already addressed the Cushman Adams redevelopment. We really do appreciate the fact that the council are not moving forward to that before we get engaged with the consultants. So that was very good news. Talked a little bit about the heritage trees already. Is there any other new business that I've missed? If not, next month's meeting. I did get one question about how we decide what the topics. We love to hear suggestions from people in the North End as to what they want to hear about. And one of the issues that was brought to us as a board was about water, specifically the cost of handling the sewage and handling the stormwater, and how that cost is impacted by increased development or whatever. So we are actually, next month, we are going to be addressing that. The city is sending somebody to talk about sewage water, somebody to talk about stormwater, and we've invited Communities for a Healthy Bay because they have an opinion as to how that's being handled. So hopefully we will see, even with a nice day next month, we hope we will see some of you. So if there's no other business, thank you very much. Fabulous attendance, and thank you for receiving all the report.